guys, it's Rebecca. So today I'm going to be doing a video where I react to 1 and 2 star reviews of Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan Maguire. My rant review for this book should be out. I just thought it'd be kind of a funny idea to do this. I'm really excited and I just think it might be hilarious. So I'm going to go and get into reading the rant reviews. I'll just read this out. So it says the novel has, I've never read any of these reviews by the way, this is complete like first reaction. So it says the novel at its centre a fascinating idea. One gleaming with potential. I completely agree with that. A school full of children cast out of their various Narnias, longing to go back. Oh, and there's a serial on the prowl. Too bad that potential was squandered on a predictable and often inept narrative. Completely agree. Grudgingly repetitive dialogue and ham-handed exposition and characters who are trying awfully hard to entertain with their snarky dialogue. I feel like I should be awarding points to the book for including both an asexual character and a trans character, not to mention a manic pixie Asian character, but I just can't. I agree. I love diversity, and that of course includes individuals like me who identify as something outside of the straight white norm, but these characters didn't resonate and actually felt more like boxes being checked than actual people. It's bizarre how overrated this book is. I 100% agree with all of that. So note number 1, people don't start nonchalantly boxing up a friend's possessions a scant couple of hours after finding that friend's dismembered corpse, and a small school would probably not just be moving on and getting back to classes in less than a day because, you know, grief is a thing. I completely agree with that. It's very odd. There is no handling of grief, especially because these are children slash whatever they are. It's not at all explained. Nothing is. Note number 2, having a second victim be alive while her eyes were pulled out of their sockets seems maybe, I don't know, rather ridiculously sadistic. I mean, I get that the author didn't like this character and so for some reason had to punish her, but isn't that a bit unnecessary for a young adult novel? I don't know about that because this novel, I would argue, is written incredibly childishly. Note number 3, identifying a character as Latino and having their Narnia be some fantasy Day of the Dead land only makes the author seem more like a well-intentioned but basically clueless white liberal checking off some demographic box. That's how I felt, while not understanding that noting someone as Latino could mean that they look like any shade of white, brown or black, and it is certainly no equivalent to the generous physical descriptions given to every other character. I actually didn't notice any of this, so I'm not going to have much to say on that. Note number 4, it doesn't help a story when the already glaringly obvious idea that is driving that story is stated explicitly and repeatedly. Oh my god, that is exactly what I said. Because yeah, I actually do understand that these diverse fantasy lands are an analogy to the diverse and very personalised worlds that children and teens live in, because that's already pretty damn transparent. I completely agree with that. C.S. Lewis gets railed on because his Narnia adventures are such an obvious Christian allegory, but I don't recall any moment when a character from one of his books decides to say something along the lines of, oh, hey everyone, did you realise that we are all living in some sort of Christian allegory? I completely agree. It kind of gets us like, well, that's just some stupid Christian allegory. Well, first of all, why is that bad? Why is that bad? It's definitely more famous than your book. Note number 5, strangely enough, I think this could have been much improved if it was twice its current length. I agree. At the very least, there would have been given some room for the characters to deepen and grow, and for the story to not feel like such a rush job and checklist. Every Heart a Doorway is full of interesting ideas, but those ideas are delivered with an excruciating shallowness. I completely agree. So, my camera just died. I'm going to be just continuing on reading the 1-star reviews. There's actually so many, so yeah, I'm just going to go through 1-star ones because I don't want to read anything that's going to be 2 stars because I kind of had a small look through them and they were just kind of boring. I like one of these reviews where it says at least it was short. That's exactly how I felt, and honestly I've lowered my rating down to 1 star after reading some of these. Too childish and completely unentertaining. I've never read Maguire before, but I have little desire to check out her work now. That's me. This is about a home for children who return from make-believe worlds, think Alice in Wonderland, but they're seriously messed up. There is a mystery slash thriller twist in the plot, but it's not a great one. While the premise sounds interesting, this book was not. The storyline was engaging and the characters gave little to no connection to go off. That is very true. Goosey scale rating, 0 out of 10. Oftentimes, if the story isn't good, you won't get goosebumps. Such is true with this case. And first sentence rating, 4 out of 10. The girls were never present for the entrance interviews. That is kind of a terrible opening line actually. I'd say this opener is on the lower end of the average scale. It presents slight engagement and curiosity, but there's really no information to get you wrapped in. Begins with a powerful premise and theme. The wayward children are those who visited fantasy worlds but can't go back, and it's none too subtly implied that queerness can be quite akin to knowing there's a magical world somewhere out there, knowing how amazing everything could be, but alas, being confined to our reality, cruel, unmagical, and often outright abusive. It's a deeper dig into the idea that it gets better, and it says, you know what, that's a nice thought, but it doesn't really matter that much, or doesn't really get better. What? And it doesn't really get that much better. Honestly, it's still so bad in so many ways. And how do you even deal with that? How do you get through the day? How does knowledge change your life? Which I love, which I really wanted to see. Unfortunately, once all that has been established, the book kind of shrugs and gives up on all those thematics and shifts into a banal murder mystery. The significance of longing for those impossible worlds, of being an odd community of misfits whose only solace is each other, collapses into a generic MacGuffin. The conclusion, alas, is even worse. Suddenly it turns out that some people totally can get back to the magic world, can return whenever they want to, in fact. These are exactly the things that have portrayed early on as impossible, as naive and self-deluding to hope for. In my mind, this feels like an unearned happy ending that brutally undermines the painful situation which the premise is all about. In short, every Hearted Doorway slips from a powerful high concept premise into generic adventuring with little depth. I agree with that, but I can't be bothered reading more. I think this will be fun. DNF. Could not finish, too cookie for me, and I felt it was trying too hard to incorporate a wide diversity of sexual preferences. Completely agree. Asexual, trans, person who masturbates with roommate present. I actually love that. That's actually hilarious. Every Hearted Doorway has a great premise. How would the children who visited places like Oz, Wonderland, Narnia, or Neverland deal with life in our world after their return? Blah blah blah. It's a great concept, but it's terrible, basically, is the person saying. The novel takes further missteps in its efforts at representation. It is being praised for those efforts. Warning, quite a few spoilers ahead. The main character is asexual. There is a trans character. There are people of colour in the story. That kind of representation can be a positive thing, but this book deals with identity by checklist. I agree, as if the author was casting a politically correct bridge crew for the next incarnation of Star Trek. These characters aren't really explored, and they barely inform the characters at all. The characters, like the premise, are somewhat underdeveloped, and Seanan Maguire chooses to focus on a few misfits who long to live out what I can only describe as a goth fantasy. Her protagonists range from morbid, Nancy the main character desperately wants to return to the haunts of the dead, and Jack who wants to do something with the lungs. I'd give it 0 stars, but kudos to the author for writing it. It promised me so much, but it was horrible. Everything, the storyline, the pace, the characters, they were such stock characters and empty. The world building sucked. The book was a waste of my time. I agree. Can't find really any funny one. Oh my gods, I like this one. This was like a Tumblr fanfiction that somehow got published. That is not a good thing if you were wondering. The book made me feel absolutely nothing. Terrible characters, murder is treated like it happens there every day, cliched ending, 100% agree. Besides the Doctor Who comments, I was pretty bored reading this. It reminded me of when I read Six of Crows the first time. I was thrown into a world before I was explained what kind of world it was. There was a story without understanding. At least with Six of Crows, you're supposed to have read the Grisha trilogy, so we're supposed to have already known the world. But with Seanan Maguire, it feels like we're just thrown into the second book of the series. I'm so disappointed. I feel as if this would have been made twice the size. It would have been an amazing story, but I wouldn't have been able to get through it. This flaming piece of hot garbage with a virtue signal loud enough to reach both the banks of the river Styx and highest clouds of Mount Olympus is an absolute black hole of literary disgrace. I love that. The potential for this story is astounding. Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children is a sanctuary boarding school, blah blah blah. But what is actually executed is a cheaply copied version of the Miss Peregrine series, coupled with the lamest, most juvenile murder mystery I have ever read. Yes, finally, somebody else has realised this. Yes, it's completely copied. The characters were flatter than pancakes, the writing was barely coherent, and the story was an ill-placed sermon disguised as a joke, disguised as a fun and clever sci-fi read. When you use your own voice to validate and put a gold star on the same diversity tokenism that the worst offenders exploit, you better have more than a picked over rotten carcass of a story in which to plop it. My favourite thing about it was how short it was. I agree. DNF. This is one of those books where you constantly ask yourself, WTF am I reading? The last straw for me was when a girl died and one of the students decided to strip her skin off. The other student carried her to one of the student rooms, which is a laboratory. The student asks to look at her before he strips her skin off. One of the students asks if he's being pervy. He says no. A corpse is like a vibrator. I forgot about that. I completely forgot about that. And then they go, oh yeah, I guess that actually makes sense. That actually happens. They can't give consent. He likes to reanimate them first so they can give consent. And that, folks, is where I stopped reading the book. Random talking about vibrators and masturbation. What the heck does any of this have to do with the book and the story? It is completely out of nowhere. It's like the author wanted to add it in and saw a random place it might fit and decided, okay, this is a good spot. All the characters are horrible. None are likeable. I read about 3/4 of the book, but this part was the last straw. I completely agree with that. That is so funny. Got halfway through and just couldn't stand it anymore. This is the kind of book people said they love for its banter, when it's honestly just a bunch of heartless and annoying characters saying things that don't make sense. Like literally half the characters are lol tacos. XD, I'm so random. That was so annoying. That is so true. The concept of worlds and their alignments was interesting enough to keep me going at first, but it wasn't enough. Nobody in this book had a genuine human reaction to anything, and it was like reading a book about robots. I'm all for representation, duh, but the diverse characters truly just did feel like boxes to tick, as other persons said. The way their identities and sexual orientations came up were so contrived and unnatural. Hated it. I just hated it. Completely agree. It was not what I was expecting at all. To be honest, it was just plain weird, and I wouldn't be able to explain the plot to someone to save my life. It reads like a simple middle grade story, but with the odd curse word, sexual remark thrown in for shock value. That's what I said. I found it more annoying than entertaining, and certainly do not plan to be reading any more from this author. The only reason I read to the end was because I was able to do it in a couple of hours, otherwise it would have been a DNF. I just don't understand the point of the story. Because hope is a knife that can cut through the foundations of the world. I really wanted to like this story, but it didn't. It wasn't really my thing, and I wish that I would have got it. Since I love the October Day series, I felt that every Heart of Door would be right up my alley. The writing, the plot, the characters, it all felt off, and not the right kind of off. I think there needs to be a conversation in the bookish community about the elusive, ever increasingly talked about topic of inclusivity and representation. I watch a lot of booktube. This book was raved about time and time again, never for any specifically universal reason, but one thing was brought up again and again: representation. So hey, I kept on seeing it and I got it. I want to go back in time to when I decided to read this book and punch myself in the face for considering it. The only pro this book has was that it was less than 200 pages, so the torture I experienced reading it wasn't long lived. I agree. First, the pitch of this book is honestly cool. We often read stories of kids, teenagers entering fantastical, whimsical worlds, but no author to my knowledge has really tackled the reality of what happens when they're forced to leave these worlds. Who is going to be there to pick up the pieces when they fall? This book is part what I imagine Miss Peregrine's blah blah blah. I never read this book to have been like, but for all this book had in pitch, it absolutely lost all of it in execution. Yeah, I mean this is very long, so I'm not going to go into it, but I do agree with that person also. This book is saturated with bad ethics and a problematic gender conversation. Agreed. Nah mate, was bored from start to finish. Sauce, bye. I like that one. Can't seem to find that many funny ones. So I'm gonna read this one. I'll read this one as the last one. This is a 2-star review. It says, Nancy has no personality except what the world she went to give her. This is extremely problematic since she's ace. It makes her look like asexual people are so bland that they have to go to a fantasy world to get any personality. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that's a bit extreme, but even after going to the fantasy world, she only has 3 personality traits. She likes to stand still, she doesn't eat much, and she only wears black and white. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, true actually. Miss Eleanor is a horrible headmistress. Honestly, she knowingly lets a student dissolve a dead body in acid. That is so true. I was expecting this book to be about kids going to school and adjusting. Yeah, Nancy is really passive. I don't even understand why she's the protagonist. Yeah, she's very, very boring. And then this, so I completely disagree with this because it says, this writing is so beautiful. Just have a look at this quote. Now, this is terrible. You're nobody's rainbow. You're nobody's princess. You're nobody's doorway but your own. And the only one who gets to decide how the story ends is you. I feel like anybody could write that line. Anybody. You're the only one who can decide your story. Has that not been written 6 million times? And everybody has that as their leading quote. You're the only one who can decide your story. I've read that 600 times. I've seen that on adverts about razors. You know what I mean? Like, that could be on anything. Shampoo adverts. You're the only one who can write your story. That's what that reminds me of. That's what it reminds me of. Like some terrible L'Oreal advert or something. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching, and if you did, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you thought this was funny at least. And I will see you in the next one.